Hey guys and girls, Bored Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about the first episode of The Girl in the Mirror, which is a new Netflix series. So it's episode 1 and it is called The Fog. This is a Spanish language show which Netflix have picked up. It's a supernatural mystery type show, although quite a bit of drama as well. Salma, who's on a school trip or like a college trip with a crash, and she wakes up disfigured and also with amnesia. Seems to remember she was in a crash, but she can't remember anything else. So she can't remember her name, her identity, and she's not aware of anything around her, anyone else in her life. So she's got basic amnesia, but she does actually seem to remember she's in a crash, which seems a bit random and a bit inconsistent to me, but there you go. So she starts to have these weird experiences. There's this other girl who starts appearing to her in sort of like ghostly form, and certain weird things start to happen when she's in the hospital, and she starts to learn some details, like she's got a boyfriend, or this guy at least, James, who she's sort of seeing on and off, and he's still alive but he's been disabled, and he sort of fills her in on the rest really. So there's a few who are in comas, and there's a few who are basically dead. The episode is sort of set up, so we start like 8 hours before the trip. So there's like a party like the night before, and one other detail we learn is that one of their friends, one of their classmates, Lara, has died in the past, and there's a bit of history because of what happened with her. And you have this character of Deva, I think her name was, who's obviously shaping up to be quite a big character, who they're playing like this spin the bottle style game, and it's sort of thing where they're doing like dares and stuff, and it's a slight nitpick of mine, but really, I mean, this is like a modern set drama and they're playing spin the bottle and dares. Have young people not moved on? But tell me in the comments, because I know this, you see it a lot in American type dramas. I've never come across anyone at a party in this country playing it. Now, it sort of obviously is true because it pops up in so much, but it just surprises me something that's being released now would have like a scene where they're like playing spin the bottle, their identity, someone they know, that like they've put their identity in the game, and that, you know, each one who the bottle lands on has to pick like the identity, and then they have to answer questions about it. And it turns out someone has put Laura's identity into the game, and I mean, it's sort of a bit convenient, but Alma is the one who realises, and she's that identity, and she finds out that this other character, Devon, is the one who put it in. So there's a bit of friction there. Deva seems to have a reason, but she doesn't really get to explain. It's not very good. It's pretty awful, to be fair. So, first of all, I think what happens a lot of times with these Netflix foreign shows is then often they'll just pick up any sort of cheap trash, really, you know, to sort of have like extra content and maybe appeal to other corners of the world. And this seems to be the deal with this, because when it opened and you had like this landscape and some fog, I thought maybe there's going to be a little bit of style here, a little bit of a budget. But as we went on, it was clear that this was a very cheap show, very cheap looking. Now, one of the big tests of this is the scene where the bus crashes, because that looks so bad. It looks so phony. Like, you had like all this fog surrounding it and drama around that, but even that didn't really look that convincing. It looked like pretty cheap, phony sort of fog. But even worse, when the bus actually crashes and you get like the roof caving in, like the roof panels. Now, even that looked like it was being done by CGI, like almost like they didn't really have the budget to do it practically, so they went all CGI. And the standard of the CGI effects are really bad in this. And then you do get a little bit of blood because you see like one of the students up by glass. And that looks really bad. It's sort of quickly cut around, but that looked really cheap and bad. And when you get Alma in the hospital later and she's all disfigured, I thought the makeup effects on that look pretty bad. I mean, I've seen worse, I guess, but that was pretty bad as well. And just when she was seeing like these sort of ghostly visions around the hospital and different things happening, that just looked bad. Like the standard of CGI was really poor. And I think the problem with this sort of show, where you have like, it's basically like a setup here where you're going to have supernatural elements and a mystery to it. The problem is one of two things. Well, firstly, to really make it work, I think it has to feel dramatic, it has to feel gripping, and you need a certain like quality to the production and the effects, and this clearly doesn't have it, which makes me worried about moving forward, because I kind of want that suspense, I kind of want the intrigue and style, and based on this first episode, I can't really see how we're going to get that. The other problem is then sometimes they'll use the whole setup of, well, there's dark secrets, there's, you know, mystery to it, rather than actually running with like an interesting supernatural premise or a sort of a premise where there's going to be like dramatic twists and turns. They'll just play it up like a soap opera type thing. So even in this, there's certain stuff that there's a bit of like mystery surrounding before that they go on the trip, and then the next day when they're on the trip and the aftermaths, we then find out some stuff, and it's just very like cheesy soapy type stuff. So it's stuff like Alma seems to be with Tom cheating on Deva or something like that. I got the impression. Then he seemed to be with Deva, but they were seeing each other. Cheesy soapy feel this, because like the scene in the woods in like before the trip where Deva went off and she was missing, it cuts around the different characters and we see them all in sort of like couples type things. So someone else was with some guy in the woods. You had Tom and Alma, and then you had a couple of guys who there was a bit of tension with, and they have a thing. So it cuts around them, and it just feels sort of super cheesy and soapy. And the music as well has a very like melodramatic sort of feel to it. You get like this really cutesy, cheesy emo style vibe between Alma and Tom, because there's this scene on the bus where, I guess because they're keeping their relationship private, they go and sit on different sides of the bus, but then there's just this really like cheesy scene where they're like listening to the same song. That was just so indie cutesy. It was kind of a bit toe sort of curling. But the other thing is the acting's pretty bad as well. Now, the one playing Alma, the actress playing her, I thought was decent. She was solid enough, and that probably happens a lot in these shows where maybe if they know we're going to have a main character and she's the one we're going to spend most time with, because she's in most scenes in this episode, then they don't really bother putting a lot of effort into the other casting. The performances I thought was pretty bad, and you obviously had, as I said, half the first episode is getting to know the characters a bit, although you don't really get to know them that much or enough to really care when it comes to the bus crash, because it's a funny thing to say considering how bored I was by the characters, but like in a way it could have done with just having the first episode, most of that being getting to know them a bit more, but then having the bus crash at the end and then her waking up enough to really care about these characters or be like invested. But to be fair, that is obviously the setup and the premise for the show, so I guess I can't be that harsh on it for that, but it just stood out a bit than these characters were very weak, very disposable, and maybe it could have given us a bit more with them. And Alma, even though I quite like the actress, like that character didn't really stand out too much to me, but the characters, generally speaking, were like really bad. Really sort of one note and forgettable. Could get better with more episodes, just because once you get into what's going on, I think my concern with that is just then because it seems to be playing into like the more soapy type elements, and because it doesn't have much of a budget and the direction isn't very good, then I'm just worried then it'll be like that all the way through. Then it just won't play into the sort of style or the sort of intrigue then you really want from this sort of show, or at least than I really want. So I can't really recommend this one at all. If I had to guess, I would say we're going to find more about what happened to Lara in the past, and maybe it's going to be something to do with Alma, like maybe we find out that she's responsible somehow. Like, the title's very on the nose, Girl in the Mirror, and like the episode does end with like what seems to be another girl appearing to her. It's like either Alma did it, or she knows who did it or was involved somehow. If I had to guess, I would say that's maybe where this was going. There was one good scene, I'd say. There's a scene in the hospital where Alma starts reacting to things. She starts having like a relapse caused by spooky shit going on around her, and that actually got quite gory, where they were like trying to operate on her and stuff, and just like, I think, I'm not quite sure what they were trying to do. It looked a bit weird, but visually it looked good anyway. That was like quite a good horror scene. So that's like the one scene that really stood out and was good for me. But besides that, it was really bland and forgettable, really sort of soapy, very cheesy, as I said. So that's the first episode of Girl on the Mirror, or in the Mirror, I should say. Now, I think I might come back for one more episode, and the only reason is because it might be fair to give it the chance to like surprise me, to actually go with another episode and then see what happens, see if they actually run with it and do some intriguing stuff with the mystery of the show. But based on this first episode, I'm really not that hopeful. 8 episodes, and they're all reasonably short, so it has that in its favour at least. But if you have seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. You can also support me on patreon.com/borednow for extra content. But I'll be back with more TV reviews soon. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.